Lifeweaver Bap should not be winning games against some of the best players in the world, yet it is.
Creeping, one deep outside we sleeping. B226, I'm a demon. Double heat, double the fun, double meaning.
Now, Lifeweaver has already seen some play by the Koreans, but when the most hyped up Western team, GK, not just play, but win on a terrible backline against partner team SSG, something's going on. Starting off, we need to talk about what Bap Lifeweaver, or as some would call it, the Beaver backline, are good at. Firstly, they both have verticality and they both have get out of jail free cards. This means they can double pocket a single target, so stick around to see that. If Baptiste lives through a dive, he'll also get high value from his damage output. But that's a big if. Bap Weaver are not very good at preventing or living dives, which makes it all the more surprising that they actually be a very aggressive dive comp. It's something that we see in the very first fight, as Maimon on the Sombra gets spooked by the Tracer, giving Sugarfree space to flank. Sugarfree eventually goes on the backline, but because his dive is completely mistimed with what his ball does, he gets forced out. And honestly, this is one of the biggest reasons as to why Bap Weaver worked. SSG were just shit. Even professional coaches did not buy the Bap Weaver comp.
Lifeweaver Bap, what are they going to do? They're going to pedal up here? Where's the guy that was saying the Lifeweaver is going to... You're going to pedal up here? You think that's going to work? What happens when my ball grapples up here and then slams the pedal? And then the Lifeweaver gets launched up in the air, and then everyone shoots him and he dies, right? Like...
Because of the dive mistiming, the Bap Weaver are able to live for quite a bit, eventually catching Seeker on the Tracer. You can see the damage Ultraviolet is able to land, and I think against bad teams or bad dives, Baptiste is one of the best heroes for punishing those types of mistakes. Despite this, Admiral actually petals out of the LOS from his own Baptiste, leading to his death, so despite how messy this dive becomes, the Beaver backline sadly goes down. Clearly, the Bap Weaver backline struggle at living even the most scuffed of dives. That's where the Sombra, and to a lesser extent the Winston, come in. A lot of their job will be to slow down the enemy flankers by marking them out or diving them 2v1. I always get comments about what marking means. It's just a term used from football, meaning to stay close to an opponent. In fact, we saw Maimon try and do this in the first fight, but the issue is that he's taking a 1v3, meaning that he's the one that gets forced out. Instead, when he sticks closer to his own backline, he's more easily able to force out the enemy Sombra. It's only once Maimon thinks his backline is safe does he start to pressure the enemy Ana. Speaking of Ana, Cuff's job on Winston is to also help force out flankers, but to zone out and block Ana's nade from hitting his Beaver backline. Now, because SSG's dive is so shit, it's rare that CJ even gets a good nade to begin with, but still, it should never really happen if Kuffa is able to properly block it. Next fight, we see Maimon force out Squid on the Moira, who eventually gets two-man dove by both the Winston and Sombra. Squid should never be playing this aggressively if his team aren't set up for it, so again it's kind of on him. After Squid dies, we see the Beaver backline safely rotate past the ball slam, which again has zero follow-up. Admiral then pops the tree in the middle of points, which honestly I wish I could say was good, but it doesn't have LOS to lethal or to his Baptiste. Soon after, Ultraviolet pops the window, which looks pretty decent. All the enemy divers are directly in front of the window, which zones them off. Sugarfree does EMP the window, catching and killing the Baptiste, but winning this fight has been very costly. Only tree and window were used this fight, and considering it was still very messy despite using EMP, mines and pulse bomb, it's more of a reflection on SSG. In fact, while SSG are trying to clean up, Admiral platforms himself up and surfs on the rooftop, just about avoiding death, so maybe Weaver is secretly broken. That actually leads me onto the last fight about Weaver Bap. Because both heroes can escape either by Petal or by Exo Boots, and because Tracer Sombra have no verticality, the Beaver backline can use the high ground on first point to dodge any of the dive pressure. This is something that I brought up in my previous Weaver video, but it becomes even more obvious here. Things start off well as Maimon solo EMP Seeker, catching the kill and making the dive a lot more manageable for his backline to deal with. Admiral soon grips Ultraviolet to safety, and so far, everything is looking good. Unfortunately though, Lethal is completely split from his backline, meaning the second he pops Overclock, he can't get any help. Meanwhile, Admiral uses the platform to escape the Sombra pressure and UV dances around the high ground with his Exo Boots. Sadly, it's not enough. Because Maimon also gets caught in this fight, it becomes near impossible for the Bapweaver to make a comeback. Not to worry though, because over the next 2 rounds, the Beaver comp starts to make a comeback. Starting off, Admiral tosses a platform by the high grounds, allowing his Ramattra to control the high grounds. Ramattra also has a bad frontline matchup against Orisa. She can spin you away, javelin you away, and the damage in your Nemesis form gets halved because of her armor. The platform fixes this because it gives Ramattra the ability to not take this matchup at all. Here, we see him take the platform and almost kill the Tracer with just 2 punches. In the meantime, UV controls and forces out the Sombra, eventually jumping to the high ground to heavily pressure the Orisa. Straight after, UV jumps to the high ground again, popping Regen Burst to help out his Sombra, but to also give him faster attack speed onto Squid. Last time I covered the perks for Weaver and talked about how the passive healing can stack with Inspire, which is kind of a similar thing with Regen Burst. Breaking down perks for Baptiste is hard though, since UV actually left the game after the 2nd round and chose a different major perk once he joined back. Regardless of whether he was trying to change major perks, either one is fairly decent. The faster attack speed makes Bap a better duelist, but the rocket boots also give him a better escape. Thankfully, the minor perk is pretty straightforward. The shoulder turret is cute, but the immortality perk is such a no-brainer against dive. That extra burst healing could come in clutch. We get to see that come into play next fight, as UV tosses the lamp to save lethal, with Admiral gripping lethal the second the lamp goes down. The grip doesn't just save him though, it gives him a great angle for High Noon, catching Squid on the Moira. Now in actuality, forcing out these cooldowns is fine for SSG. It's Squid who throws by going on a super hard flank, meaning his Juno just dies to a single Sombra. Squid is also the only one dying to High Noon, which shouldn't be happening considering you're on Moira. Now this isn't to discredit what GK are doing, but it is to show that a better team wouldn't really struggle against the comp. This couldn't become any more obvious on the next point, where SSG do a good job of clearing and taking their angles for their dive. The Weaver is forced to grip his Baptiste back to safety, and when you zoom out, the Beaver backline just doesn't have much space to play with. However, because Kellen goes in way too early, he just feeds and dies. Had he taken a second for Sombra to get in position, or for his backline to fight off the Sombra, the Beaver backline would be cooked. But because SSG's coach, Hunter, is ever so slightly fraudulent, Ultraviolet is able to punish the Winston and Sombra. Things only get worse for SSG. Now, if you look at this top down, it looks bad for the Beaver comp. The Ram casts are low, they're already a man down, and there's an enemy EMP to deal with. So surely they just lose this fight, right? Well, unfortunately, sugar-free EMPs with 0 angled pressure. All the dive pressure is coming from one single direction. There is no Tracer pincer, or Winston jumping in, or Moira flanking. Seeker actually had his recall forced out beforehand, but all SSG need to do is wait. Because of the terrible mistiming, the Bapweaver are able to absorb and punish the dive. One interesting thing to note is how the Weaver splits off from his Bap cast. This is something that we also saw on the previous points, with the Bap and Weaver being on slightly different angles. It's probably to create distance, so that life grip actually becomes useful, but to also create a different angle for Baptiste to actually do damage. And considering UV has that window, that would make sense. We eventually see the both of them join back up, giving each other a hand when fighting off the Tracer. Next fight, we get to see some juicy petal value, as Admiral not only avoids the Sombra, but also the Winston trying to jump him. He quickly moves around the high ground, eventually gripping his Baptiste and treeing for sustain. Now, with CJ dead and Kellen very low, the game is basically over. So is Bapweaver actually good? No, it's not. You know how in chess you can make a move so bad that it's called a blunder? That's basically what happened to SSG every fight. Dogshit EMPs, gold level dive timing, and letting poor CJ die alone because you want to take a flank that makes less sense than Trump's tariffs. Bapweaver do have their moments, and I'm not gonna deny that, but a half decent dive team would have torn this backline apart. Still though, props to GK for the content. Check out this video here if you enjoyed, and until next time.